Good morning. Thank you for joining my classroom today. It's a privilege to have you. Today, we are going to be learning about saving the Earth's environment and its natural resources. So, get your thinking caps on, and we're going to learn today. So what we're going to do is we have three main vocab words that we're going to need to know in order to understand what saving the Earth's environment and natural resources means. So, number one we're going to talk about is consumers. So I'm going to read that out to you. Consumers get energy by eating other organisms. So for example, a consumer could be like a rabbit that you see in your backyard. A rabbit is normally out in your backyard munching around, maybe munching on some grass. So it's getting energy by eating other organisms like plants. Decomposers, they break down dead matter. So if you would think of a decomposer, you could maybe think of like fungus or any other like bacteria eating things. Like fungus break down dead animals by eating them, and then they also get energy from that. And then our last one is producers. Producers create energy through photosynthesis. It's a big word. Say that again with me. Photosynthesis. So what photosynthesis is plants use it so they make it their own food from it, which gives the plants energy to live and to sprout and all of that. So these are our three main vocab words that we're going to focus on. So remember those, keep those locked in your brain, and then, that's good to know. So what we're going to move into is, I want you to kind of think of when you have an apple core in your hand, and you throw it away, say you throw it either in the garbage or you throw it out the window into the ditch, where does that apple core go? Or what happens to that apple core? Does it stay like that forever? Does it maybe disintegrate and go into the soil? Does a bird pick it up and fly? So just think about it. I'm going to give you about a minute or so. Just kind of think about where you think the apple core may go. Alrighty, so let's come back together. Maybe you said something like the apple core, disintegrated and it went into the soil, giving the soil energy and sprouting something. Maybe when you threw the apple core out, you had a seed in there, and you threw the apple core into the ditch and a wild apple tree started to grow. All great reasons I hope you thought of. The next thing I want you to think about is, what can we do at home? So where you're sitting right now, what can you do to help break down waste, whether that's an apple core, a banana peel, soil, anything like that? What can you do at home to break down that plant rather than just throwing it in the trash, sending it to the landfill and never seeing it again? What could you do at home to maybe help break that down rather than sending it to the landfill? So I'm going to want you to think about it. I'll give you 30 seconds here, and then we'll come back together. Alrighty, maybe you talked about you could throw it in your garden. Maybe you have a garden in your backyard that your mom uses to plant her vegetables and use them for supper and salads. So what if you would throw your apple core and your banana and all that good recyclable, renewable stuff into your garden, helping your garden grow better so your mom can have better tomatoes and plants like that, and like some tomato plants, better vegetables. Maybe that's a good idea. Hopefully you thought of that. And another thing is, like we talked about earlier, if we have an apple core with some extra seeds, we could maybe plant another apple tree. So if you wanted to plant an apple tree in your backyard, you easily could. Maybe you'll do that. Hopefully you take that out and maybe you do that. The last question I want you to think about before we just to introduce here is, should we recycle at home? It's a real question. Should we recycle? I know some people don't. Maybe your parents do and you. I know in the classroom there's a recycling bin all the time, but just something to think about. Should we recycle or should we not? So tomorrow we're going to come back and get back into that question, and I hope you have an answer for me. Thank you. Good morning, fourth graders. Today we're going to be continuing talking about the ecosystem. So as you see here, I have an ecosystem that I made for you guys with a bunch of different environmental parts into it, like frogs, logs, algae. we're going to be taking a look at that. So what is an ecosystem, you may ask? An ecosystem is like a community where all living and non-living things work together. The living things like the frogs, the worms, the algae are all called organisms. Non-living things like the sun, cloud, and logs all support these resources. Let's take a look at some of these of the ecosystem that we have on our project. So first we're going to take a look at the sun. The sun provides energy to the plants, to the trees, to the flowers, and to the algae. Plants use the sunlight to make their food through the process called photosynthesis. Remember we talked about that word? That's a vocab word. This energy is like the starting point for their food chain. Trees and flowers. So as you can see here, we have a tree and a flower, all part of our ecosystem. Trees and flowers are producers. They create food for other organisms to eat. Flowers are the main thing for rabbits to eat. Trees also provide oxygen, which animals like frogs and fish all breathe. Frogs are consumers. They eat the insects and worms, keeping the populations in check. Frogs also serve as a food chain for larger animals like fish and birds and snakes that are all part of our ecosystem. Worms are decomposers. They break down dead plants and animals, turning them into nutrients for the soil so our flowers can grow. So we're going to take a look at the log now. The log may not seem that important, but it is. When a tree falls, a log becomes a habitat for another animal, like a rabbit and also fungi. Over time, it decomposes, returning nutrients to the soil. And then clouds. We have quite a few clouds here on our ecosystem that we made. And clouds bring water to the ecosystem like rain. Water is very essential for all living things. It helps plants grow, animals to stay hydrated, and algae to thrive in the ponds. Part of our ecosystem. Energy starts with the sun. Plants like trees, flowers, and algae use the sunlight to make food. Frogs and other animals eat plants that are growing from the sun, gaining energy. When animals and plants die, worms and other decomposers is a vocab word we talked about, break down and return nutrients to the soil for plants to use again and grow. This cycle keeps the ecosystem balanced for all things to work together and thrive. So now let's talk about what happens if one part of the ecosystem is missing. So let's think about it. If there were no worms, the soil would lose its nutrients and plants wouldn't be able to grow as good. If there were no frogs, insects might overpopulate. Every piece of the ecosystem is connected. It's kind of like a puzzle. When one part is affected, the whole system is affected by it. Before we wrap up, we are going to be making an ecosystem as a class. You and partners are going to be working together to create an ecosystem. So you can use cardboard from around the room, you could use colored paper, and you could use your technology to print out different types of ecosystems. You can be as creative as you want, and you're going to work together for today and tomorrow to finish your ecosystem. Before we wrap it up, let's remember that every part of the ecosystem is important. From the tiniest worm to the mighty sun, each play a role in our... Alrighty, for our lab portion of this lesson, we are going to be making our own ecosystem. So whether you're at home or in the classroom, you're going to want to grab some cardboard, some colored paper, and your technology. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get whatever color paper you want. So for mine, I have a blue sky, so I grab blue paper. For my grass, I have green paper, and then I also have a pond in here with blue paper. And then on your technology, you're going to want to pull that out, and you can start Googling different types of ecosystem organisms that you want in your ecosystem. So for mine, I have some algae, some grass, a sun, a tree. I have a frog here, and then I have a worm, because a worm is a decomposer, along with some lily pads. I have a bass in here in my pond. I also have a turtle. So you're going to want to print out and cut out whatever parts of your ecosystem that you would like. I prefer that you guys have at least 7 parts of the ecosystem, different organisms, and you would also include a sun, because the sun is the most important part of our ecosystem. And then, yeah, we guys can get to work, and we'll come back and gather together. Alrighty, as we come back together and wrap things up, I would like you to think about where you would like your poster to be placed. Whether you could post that in a classroom, you could post that at your house, you could post that somewhere around town, maybe by a recycling building or by a recycling bin, or even at the recycling building in town here. So wherever you want to place it, I can place it for you if you can't, but if you want to place it at home, that would be awesome too. And yeah, just inform others why it's important to recycle and to save the earth. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you in the next one.